depends on experience.
Right. Definitely, that part is definitely new. So we are on Daf Vav and Aleph. We're learning as a schus for Shlema, Filana Chaya Basarach. So we had said this takana of Rabbi Gamliel that he says that the shechita of a kusi is aser. They brought from a pasuk says the sam tasak and b'layacha and bal nefesh ata. You should put a knife at your throat if you're a bal nefesh, meaning stop yourself from engaging in from eating their food. So Prasha the Krova Mike's. Okay, that's a good drasha, but what does the pasuk itself mean? I mean, what is itself teaching us? So we dash from it about a Talmud who's sitting in front of his rabbi. The Tanya Reb Chi. Kisheshev lilcham as Moshe ben Toman asher shalfanecha. When you sit to eat to break bread with a ruler, bin tovan as shalfanecha. The sam pesach moyacha. This is the conclusion of the pasuk. If you understand what's in front of you, then you'll put a knife to your jaw, to your throat. In Bal Nefesh, if you are a Bal Nefesh. So we say we interpret like this. If a Talmud recognized about his Rebbe, that if he'll ask him a question, he will give a answer that will be satisfactory. Bin. In that case, you should learn from him, and that's not a good Rebbe. Bin lav. But if you know about your Rebbe, he asks him a question, he's just going to repeat what he was told, but he's not going to be able to answer any further questions. You should understand what's going on. You should keep your mouth closed. You should put a knife to your mouth. Don't say anything because you're just going to make things worse. And in Bal Nefesh perish hemenu. And if you're a good person, a person of an upstanding person who really wants to understand the Torah, then you should leave such a Rebbe. It's a Rebbe who you can ask a question, and you're comfortable asking a question. You're comfortable. You trust that the answer he's giving you has a basis. He's not just pushing you off. That's a good Rebbe. But if you're not confident in the responses he's giving you, if you are trying to do the right thing, you should get out of there. First of all, you shouldn't ask many questions, and you should get away from there at the first opportunity. Riza ben Yosef, Shadri Bavo Lasuya Chamre Bekusa. It took about Yosef sent Bavo to bring him wine from a Kusi's house. Ashke Husab. And this man came across this man. They are Mefarshim who say Husab and Gemara is a reference to Elio. Amalei, less Kanshem Torah. He said to him, why are you getting wine from these kusim? They're not Shemer Torah, and therefore their yayin is yayin nesach. You're not allowed to drink their wine. So she chased him away. He sold it over to Ravo. He said to Ravami and Ravasi. And immediately Ravasi and Ravami sat down and they made a rule until they made a rule that everyone should know that kusim are mamish are not gerei emes. They're like they're treated like goyim. Lamai. In what sense are you saying you treat them like goyim? If legabi shchita and yayin nesech, we just said in the last Gemara that Gamliel already made it a takana on them. Legabi shchita and legabi that their yayin is yayin nesech. We can't trust the shchita. So what difference does it make to say that they're avdei kechavim gemurim? So tomorrow inu gazav lekabel minayu. Also Ravami and Ravasi gazav lekibel minayu. No, Ravami and Ravasi made a new gzera. They just rebooted the gzera. People had started to become lax on it. People were not makabel the original gzera from Gamliel. Now Ravami and Ravasi were geyser. They were makabel. My avdei kechavim gemurim. What does it mean that it says that they made them into avdei kechavim gemurim? They already said that you can't use their shchita. You can't use that they're treated like their yayin is yayin nesa. In what sense was there even more treated like Avdei Kechavim? Racham Yitzchak, levatel rishos v'litin rishos. To mivatel rishos and to give rishos. That means to say that this is back from when we learned Eruvin. It was a solid 4.5 years ago. The din is a mavui or a chotzer, even if it's all enclosed, like we're always focused on the Eruv, but the Eruv is not the end of the story. In order to carry it, we say this Tekanos HaChamim, even a place that's surrounded by an Eruv, if you have multiple people living in it, you have to do an Eruv Chatzeres. Because if different people are living in it, it resembles a Rosh Hashanah. So the people have to take a piece of matzah and something, and they say that they're becoming all shutfim, so to speak, in the chotzer, so that everyone has rishus to it. The problem is what happens if you have someone, but the rule is everyone who's capable of being part of that group has to be mishtataf. There's any holdovers. Anyone who's in the chotzer who doesn't participate, that will ruin the Eruv. Okay, so let's see the Rashi. Levato rishus imdar kusi b'mavi. If you have a guy, a kusi, living in your chotzer, tzach lisker es rishusha. You have to rent his property. Even if he says I'm giving it as a matana, that's not going to be considered that he's being mavatal his rishus until he rents it. But that's only by a guy or a kusi. A Yisrael who forgets and he was not part of the Eruv, because he lives there, and we said everyone who's part of the chotzer has to participate. He has a different option. A yid has the option to just be mavatal his rishus. He says whatever rishus I have, I'm being mavatal whatever entitlements, whatever rights I have in the chotzer, so that it won't ruin the Eruv Chatzeres for everyone else. He forgot to participate in the Eruv Chatzeres, and now it's too late to do anything about it. It's on Shabbos or Erev Shabbos, so you could just say, I'm mavatal my rishus. Like Kechavim, actually Yisrael Emenu. But Oivos Kechavim, there's no such option. Oivos Kechavim has to actually rent. They have to do a physical rental. Okay. The mavatal rishus will give rishus to someone else. Tanya, Yisrael Mummer, Mishamer Shabbos B'Shok. Yisrael, even though he's a Mummer, he's not. He's let's say he's Mechal Shabbos, but B'Fahesya, he observes Shabbos. He would never let anyone see him being Mechal Shabbos. So Mishamer Shabbos B'Shok, Mavato Rishus V'Neish Rishus. He's considered a yid for this din of Erev that we just discussed, that he can middle of Vav Amanal. He has a status of a yid that he's going to be able to be involved as a shus and not ruin the Erev Chatzeres. Someone who's a Mechal Shabbos V'Asya, ain't a Mavatal Rishus V'Neish Rishus. He can just be Mavatal as Rishus or give his Rishus to someone else. Nesha Amru Yisrael Neish Rishus and Mavatal Rishus V'Oivik Kechavim Achi Yiska. Oivik Kechavim is a higher standard. We don't Oivik Kechavim. We don't trust that he really means it when he's mavatal. So we require him to do an actual rental of his rishus to the bnei chotzer in order to avoid it ruining the erev chatzeres. Ketzad has said, how does an oivik kechavim rent his rishus? Amalei rishus knuyilach rishus imuvatalas kana. All he has to do is say, my rishus is sold to you, my rishus is mavatal to you. It doesn't have to be a zikoi. When we say that you can be mevatel rishus, he's able to be kind of with a kinyan. It doesn't mean he doesn't have to do a full-fledged kinyan with the schia and his mevatel rishus that the other person is zeich in it. We allow this sort of abrogated, this truncated type of kinyan because it's all to satisfy takanas chachamim of the erev chatzeres, and that all the participants in the Erev in the Chotzer have to participate. So we allow the Yisrael to do a kind of shortened, abbreviated king. Ravasi Ikla Lepundika. the Ai. Zera Ravasi came to a inn in a place called Ai. Aisul kame beitzim hamitzum makois biyamin. They brought them cooked eggs, hard-boiled eggs, and wine. Reb Zera lo yachal. Reb Zera didn't eat them. Ravasi yachal. Ravasi ate. Amr Reb Zera le Ravasi lechayesh mal taruvas demai. This Pundaka was not a learned Jew. He was an Amaretz. As we know, we've seen many, many times, you're not allowed to eat produce from Amaretz because they're choshed on Meiser, on Trumas and Meisers. Yayin is one of the things you have to take off Trumas and Meisers. So how could he eat this bayim that were cooked in wine, that were mixed in wine? Why isn't he worried about the demai, that it's a potential Trumas and Meisers problem with the Yayin? Amalei lava daiti. He said to him, you know what? You're right. I wasn't thinking about it. I thought it was eggs. I didn't think about the wine. Amr of Zera, after Gazral to was the Mai, Mustaya Milsa Ravasi, Lamechel Isura. Is it possible that Rav Asi was going to eat something that's usher? It could never have happened. Hashtav Hemda Shaldikim and Ekashboko, maybe Takala Yodov, Tzadikim Matzmalek Koshikim. Very interesting, right? We know this, we've come across this rule that the Rebbe will never allow a Talmud Chacham, a tzaddik, to be nechsham. But you see, Rav Zera was saying that he didn't actually come to eat it because Rav Zera reminded him, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'm not going to eat it." But he wouldn't even have gotten to that point. The Rebbe would never have let him come to the point where he was about to eat it, if not that someone stopped him. In any case, we're going to get later to the story where we see the Chamar of Pinchas ben Yair. But now we're still going to talk about this. So he said it's not even possible that this is Asr, because the Rosham would never have allowed him to come to the threshold of eating something that was demai, that was potential Trumas and Meisus. He said, I have to solve this puzzle. How could this have happened? He said, you know what? I was wrong. This is not really even Asr. This Beya in Yayin of Amaretz. The Tanan. Someone who bought wine from Amaretz, and he plans to put it into a murius, which is a kind of a fish sauce, or aluntis is a different type of mixture that you mix in wine. Kashin and tchinin. Kashin is a kind of legume, type of bean that he would do. They would grind up. He wanted to make into a mixture, a ground up mixture. Adashim last man resisin, or lentils that he was going to cut them up, chop them up into a mixture. Chayiv mishum demai. All these things you chayiv for demai because you bought the actual thing. You bought the yayin, or you bought the kashinin, or you bought the adashim from Amaretz. So since it's on its own, it's also mishum demai. Certainly, if you know that the Amaretz didn't take off Trumas Samais, it's going to be awesome. But the mixtures that you were going to make from it, if you bought them directly from the Amaretz, I mean, instead of buying yayin to make aluntis or to make the murius, you bought the murius or aluntis from the Amaretz that he already had mixed in the yayin or the kashinin or the adashim. Why is that? Nation tarubas. Because at that point it's a tarubas, it's a mixture. Well, gazer al tarubas demai. We're not geyser. Chum would never geyser. They were geyser on demai, on something that is possibly from Amaretz that he might not have separated Trumas and Maisus. But if you buy a mixture from Amaretz that might contain something, and it's not, the Gemara doesn't say this, but the Rishonim say it's not the roiv of the mixture, so you could say it's batal. It's mevatel, whatever mixture of the mai there is in. But Tanya hanoisen l'shchenta isa la'afais kedera levasho, someone who gives to his neighbor to a dough and asks her to bake it for her, or a kedera, or she has a pot of soup of a cooked food, and she says, "I'd like you to cook it for me." He doesn't have to be chayshish for the possibility that she'll use her starter dough, whatever you call it, the sa'ar, the leavening agent, that's going to be, he gave it to a Amaretz, a woman who's an Amaretz. You don't have to be chayshish that maybe the sa'ar they're going to use to bake the dough, or the spices for the pot of soup, that they're going to be the mai doesn't have trumas and maises. Loy mishum shviyas v'loy mishum maises. You don't have to worry about smita. You don't have to worry about maises. V'im amalo asayimli mishalechi. But if he says you put in because you can assume he gave her together with the things that were needed, with the tavlin and the sourdough. So you could assume she didn't use her own. She used the ones that he'd given him. But if he says to her, you use your own products, you use your own tavlin and your own sa'ar, so you do have to be chayshes. But why do you have to worry about it? Why don't you say it's a tarubas? Since it's going to be mixed in the isha, who's the amaret that you're giving to bake your dough or to cook your pot of soup. Even though you're telling her that she can mix in her own stuff, but when she gives it back to you, it's going to be a mixture. It should be taruvas. It should be mutter. We're not geyser for demai. So Gemara Shani Hasan came to Kamala Silam Mishalechi command Arba Yadayim Dami. No, it's an obvious distinction. Over there, he's telling her, you put your own spices. You Amaretz lady, put your spices into it. So it's if he bought separate spices. He doesn't get the benefit that we say the Chomer not geyser on the taruvas when he buys a full-fledged taruvas. He's not getting the taruvas. He's telling her to put her spices into his food. It's only becoming a taruvas at his direction.
Yes, why
taruvas are different?
Yeah.
The answer is because it's all exera, and be'etzem it's bottle roib. So the chum not geyser in a case you also have bittel, where it's bottle, and they don't let you go be a dime after you can never be mavatal is to be a dime, right? You can't take a teaspoon of milk and put it into a huge thing of soup and say I'm being mavatal. You're not allowed to be mavatal on purpose.
So that's the shakasayim. Yeah.
Essentially, yeah, that's what. So the question is, when you tell her you could mix in, is that considered as if it was mu'urav before you got it? Because she's doing it over there. It's not, you don't have the dough.
Is that considered after the fact or before the fact?
Right. So we're saying in the end, of course, it's before the fact, because you're instructing her to do it. Even though she has reshus over it at the time it's done. Rafa Mamar, he says a different text. Shani Sar B'Tavl and the time of it. The time of the bottle. Here was where we see that it's coming out spittle. It's the first mention we have a bittle. He says that you don't even have to come on to that, even if you would consider that it happened beforehand. But it's only when you have a miyat that it could be bottled. But this, since it's what gives the tavlin give the tam to the pot of food, so it doesn't become bottled, even if it was done by the Amaretz. The first part of this price that we just said of the story was that we said if he didn't instruct her to exchange it, then you can eat the tavshel and you can eat the bread. You don't have to worry that the Hamaretz had substituted her own ingredients for the ones that you had given her. Back to Mara, but why aren't we chayshish for that? But not. Someone who gives something to his mother-in-law in this case, not in every case, but in this particular case, is an Amaretz. And he gives a food to bake or to cook. He has to take meiser from whatever he gives to her because he knows she's not going to do it. And whatever he takes from her, he has to take meiser from. Neish chashuda, we're worried that she takes the bread, she takes the dough, she's going to say, this dough is already getting a little stale. I have a fresh dough. I'll take my own dough that even though he had taken meiser from what he had given her, from the dough he had given her to bake, he has to then, when he gets the bread, take meiser from that as well, because we're chayshish that she switched the doughs on him.
Take it twice.
Yes, take twice. I mean, it might not be twice. If she switched it, then it's only once. So, but we had said in our previous brisa that if you provided the sa'ar and tavlin to Amaretz, you can assume that they used your sa'ar and tavlin. You don't assume that they switched ingredients. So the Gemara Hasam from Tanya time. That's a different thing. A mother-in-law, she's trying to switch it because she's worried that the dough got ruined. But a neighbor doesn't have that lachatz. He's not going to be so motivated to worry about that you might take back something that's no good. Is it only in the case of a mother-in-law that will chayish that she's going to switch because of her embarrassment? But tanan, hanoisim lepundikis shaloi maser eshu noisim. Someone who gives, as we're going to see, this is talking about a Talmud Chacham who was staying at an inn, and he gives the innkeeper, the woman who's an Amaretz, dough to bake. Masa shu noitzela, shu noitel him. He has to take meiser from what he gives her, and also from what he takes from her. Nechshuda mechalefes. She will chayshish again that she's going to switch it. So Gemara Hasam Nami, Marivi Amra Babe Rav Lechel Chamima Vanechel Krira. I'm sorry, Babe Rav Lechel Chamima Vanechel Krira. She says, I have a fresh bread that just came out of the oven that I made. If I'm going to give the Barbe Rav, this Talmud Chacham, the cold one, it's not Bakavidik. So I'll switch the breads. I'll give him my hot one from my own dough and give him from, I'll eat the cold one. She has an incentive, a motivation to switch. But normally, a person, we don't assume that a Amaretz is going to switch. Again, the Gemara asks, well, the Chulfa Elechashina and Vatanya. Eishes chaver techenes and eishes amaretz bizman shehi tmeya. So we have to give a little introduction over here. We had discussed before that there are people. A chaver is a Talmud Chacham, Talmidei Chachamim, or it's people who are Yorei Shemayim. Used to in the time of when there was Tumas and Tyrus, when there was Kachim, they would eat al Tyrus HaKodesh. They would treat themselves as if everything is kosher. They would avoid any kind of tumah. They would always try to avoid making anything tummy.
Or Kohanim or everybody?
Everybody. Stam Yid, because sometimes they would eat kachim also. They'd go to be Eiler Regal, or they bring a carbon. So they train themselves never to become tummy to the extent possible. So this Isha was a Eishes Chaf. So she was observing these rules. And she's going with her friend who's an Amaretz, and they're grinding the wheat, and they're together, and they're going to make bread. So we say she can do it together with her friend. When she's a tamei, because since she's a tamei, she's going to make sure when grinding the flour not to touch the flour. Since she's a tameya, she knows she has to follow the rules. When she's a tmeya, not to be mitama the food. So therefore, she's not going to come to eat that food. She won't just grab as they're I don't know how you eat when you're teichen. I guess tchines is a later. So Rashi teichenes m'seyes lahanig zerichayim k'shi teichenes es atvua shel amaretz. So I guess they would just eat some roasted grains or some raw grains somehow. So worried. I'm sorry.
I'm missing the case. So that's the mill.
So we're worried. This is the Amaretz, right? So we're worried about the mind. So if she's working together with her friend and she's a tar, we're worried that she'll just grab some grains and eat it. She won't be thinking about it, and she'll end up eating the mind. She's the Eishes Chaver.
Once she's tummy, she's not eating it anyway.
She can't eat. She doesn't touch it. She won't come to eat it. Yeah, right. Let's see Rashi. When she's tummy, the maybe she'll forget that she'll eat some of this demai tvua. The kivin the tmeihi while she's tummy, she's used to not touching. Shema titayim v'stama imedis meracha ki v'loy naga. She's stamas are going to keep far away. Worried that maybe she'll eat. Again, I don't know what exactly how she's eating this.
But too much maize? Maybe.
Tmei nida. Yeah, I think so. Right, because then she has a regular. She knows that there's a 2 weeks or whatever, 1 week, depending on what the gzera was at the time. If they have our gzera, that she always knows she has to keep away from eating, from touching food. Even when she's a tame, she shouldn't grind together with her Amaret's friend. Because even though she herself is careful, she won't remember when the friend, this Isha Amaretz, hands her some food. There's like an instinct. When someone hands you something, you take it. And you say, oh, let's have some popcorn. So she'll eat it. Even if she's tummy, she thinks to herself not to pick up, but she doesn't remember not when someone else suggests it. Now this is the part that's a little hard, a little stretch. Hashta migzal gzala chalufa mibaya. So we're saying this Ashes Amaretz, she's not really authorized to provide from the food to her friend. Her husband never said she could do it. So she's really stealing by giving it to her friend. And even so, we say with Chayshish that she's going to do that. Chalufa mibaya, certainly she would go ahead and be chaylef. She'll switch if she takes a bread from if she gets a dough from someone who's a Talmud Chacham, we should be chayshish that she's going to switch it with her own bread. Again, there seem to be two separate type of things. One is trying to be friendly, but also it's a little hard for us to understand this concept that a wife is geisel when she takes from what she's preparing and gives it to her friend. So they say that the reason why it's an issue over here is because she thinks that the friend is entitled als lesachshim sharbadisha. If someone's working, you can't stop them from eating. But that only works when the person takes themselves, not when someone else hands it over to you. So, but in any case, it still is hard to understand how that translates into the halacha of michal chofa, that we assume that if she'll steal, then she'll definitely switch. Amar Rav Yosef Hasanami Ma'ir v'Amr Torah Madisha Ka'achel. Tura Madisha Ka'achel. Over there it's different because she's Ma'ir Hatala Atzmai. She doesn't think she's stealing. She thinks she's being Yaitza. The Torah is we say a Tura that a ox when it's threshing is allowed to eat. Since this woman is working for her, she thinks she's entitled to eat, but that doesn't mean she'd be Chay. Heavy hater Yeshua ben Zor is ben Chamav Shel Rameil Fnei Rebbe. He was made on Reb Meir. He said in front of Rebbe that Reb Meir, this is the brother-in-law of Reb Meir, that he said he saw Reb Meir that he was eating vegetables in Beishan. Beishan was the area that was disputed whether it was part of Eretz Yisrael or not, and whether Trumas Samaisis applied to it. Hit the Rebbe as Beishan Kula al Yidei Chaveret. I'm sorry. Here to Rebbe at Beishan. Kula. Al Yada. Because of this story of Reb Meir, Rebbe said, from now on, we can be clear that Beishan is not part of Eretz Yisrael, and therefore whatever comes from Beishan is not also because of Trumas and Maisus.
They were brother-in-laws?
Yes. So, Rabbi Yeshua ben Zoros ben Chamav was the son of the mother-in-law, or the father-in-law, of Reb Meir. The son of the father-in-law is his brother.
Okay.
Yeah. So he told Rebbe that Reb Meir ate there, and therefore Rebbe was matir Beishan. He said it's not part of Eretz Yisrael. Chavru alav achiv ubeis aviv. His brothers and his everyone ganged up at him. Beishan we've always treated as part of Eretz Yisrael, that the fruits and vegetables that come from there are awesome. Mishum mai trumas amaisis. Ata tinig by heter. Now you Rebbe, you're saying it's mutter. So he was dashing than this possible. I guess this is because we had the story of Rabbi Gamliel was Masakin, and then Rabbi Ami Avasi was Masakin afterwards on the same thing. Or maybe Gamliel was Masak and connected what they had originally.
The previous story, the next story, that Kundaki, that bad things don't fall to the Sharikim.
Yeah, but we're saying
he ate it without giving off meiser. So Elamai must have been that area.
Maybe, right? Darshan Mikrazet, Kisas Nachash Hanachaysh, also Moshe. They destroyed, they ground up the Nachash Hanachaysh that we have in Chumash. That Moshe set up this Nachash Hanachaysh that they should look out to stop the Magefa. They ground it up in those times. Ki ara yam mahema yibnei Yisrael mekatzim loy, yikol loy nechushta. Because the Yidden were unfortunately treating this Nachash as a this is about Chizkiyo, that he grounded up because the Yidden were treating it as an Avodah Zarah, and he called it Nechushtan to say that this is like a diminutive way of referring to a Nachash, saying this is a nothing. Don't be over Avodah Zarah. Back to Gemara. Is it possible that it took till the time of Chizkiyo for it to be destroyed? Why wouldn't Asa and Yeshafat, who were his ancestors, they had come before him and they were tzaddikim and they got rid of all the Avodah Zarah? They call Avodah Zarah Shabba'ilam Asa v'Yeshafat biram. They destroyed all the Avodah Zarah in the whole world. Ella Malka Minichule Avoisav Liskader. Boy, Elamai, why was he able to destroy it? Because they left. Very interesting concept that they left something for him to do. A person can change from what the people they had, I guess, had decided that it wasn't a sufficient michshel of avodah zarah, and he overruled them because this is you often ask, like, why all of a sudden do we have people finding bugs in water? Why do we have all these new chumras? But the answer is that there is makom. Just because it wasn't the gzeira 100 years ago doesn't mean that the gzeira now. That's the way the Bershom made Torah, that if you're going to say no, we can never. Our gedolim are not entitled to make a decision because the Chavetz Chaim certainly would have asked it. And how they gedolim? I think that's. I really think that's what it means. I'm not trying to be tenditious. From here we see that a Talmud Chacham who says that new a chiddush dik dvar halacha shemizichan oisei. There's going to be three versions. So mizichan oisei is ein mavdilan oisei mishmur leimach hazar. I'm reading Rashi. We don't separate him from what he said. We don't say you have to retract what he said. V'amila ein maznichan oisei, which is you don't say we're not going to listen to you. V'amila ein mazchichen oisei. We don't. You're saying this out of gaiva that if Talmud Chacham who says a chiddush, we don't say you're just trying to make your place in the world and be a bal gaiva, but rather we listen to him. Manda Amar. So these are three different. They're very closely related, obviously. Three ways of saying we should listen to him, but addressing different things. Manda Amar Mezich, and that went down. We're not mavdal him. We don't separate him from what he said and make him retract the civil. Well, Yizach HaChoshen. The Choshen should never be separated from the Eib. Manda Amar Ein Maznichan Oisai, that we don't say that disregard his words. We don't reject them. The Chsiv Ki Lo Yiznach L'Olam Hashem, because the Rebbe will not reject us forever. Manda Amar Mazichan, Mazchichen, the Tnan, Misharabu Schuche, that means Schichen, to say it's Gaiva, because he said in the Mishnah, Misharabu Schuche Alev, Rabu Machloikas Be Yisrael. When there were more Bali Gaiva amongst the Talmidei Chachamim, that caused more Machloikas. Okay, we'll stop over here. We'll start with Beishan tomorrow. My brother David is making a siyum tomorrow, a bris for an anicle. So I haven't